Hello and welcome to interest.co.nz. I'm Gareth Vaughan with another in our series of double shot interviews. Today I'm joined by Ari Sargent, who is the CEO of Powershop. Thanks for joining us, Ari. Ari's here today to talk about the events in the wholesale electricity market on March the 26th this year, which you can see charted behind me with March the 26th being the big spike that looks like the Empire State Building. Now, this is a day that was extraordinary in this market. Prices spiked in a market where prices have no set ceiling to more than 200 times normal levels during scheduled Transpower maintenance between the Waikato and Auckland. About 35 entities, including Powershop, which is owned by Meridian, Mighty River Power, Air New Zealand, ASB, Westpac, even the Auckland Museum, complained to the regulator, the Electricity Authority, singling out SOE Genesis, which they say had the market cornered during the outage through its Huntly power station and ruthlessly exploited this through unprecedented high prices. Now, the regulator has said an undesirable trading situation occurred and proposes to reset prices at $3,000 per megawatt hour, which is way down on the $19,000 to $20,000 that Genesis charged on the day. Now, Ari, the regulator has stepped in, so is that a good outcome for Powershop and the market? I mean, obviously things went haywire on the day, but they're putting it right, aren't they?
I think it's a good thing they've stepped in. I don't think they've gone far enough. What they've done is certainly improved the situation, but it still leaves a lot of uncertainty for the future. I think the fundamental issue that they haven't really grappled with is the behavioural issue. So the market rules, since their inception in 1996, the core market rules have remained largely unchanged, a few tweaks here and there. And that they're essentially a bunch of rules around process, very light on behavioural type rules. And the existence of the undesirable trading situation rules are designed for exactly that purpose. The rules were designed to make sure that an orderly operation of a market, but without constraining participant behaviour. And as you mentioned, there's no ceiling in the market, so prices can go as high as generators feel inclined to offer. Historically, we've seen the lack of a formal cap actually probably beneficial to the market, because the generators are self-moderating and exercise restraint, unlike markets, say for example like Australia, where they have a formalised value of lost load in the tens of thousands of dollars, which really justifies generators offering at that level. So I think the lack of a cap in the New Zealand market ultimately has been beneficial until March the 26th, when Genesis decided to flex their muscle and have a go at what they could get away with, essentially. So yes, it's good that the authority has stepped in and declared that as an undesirable trading situation, and yes, it's good that they've reduced that price, but they've failed really to grapple with the underlying issue, and that's the behaviour of a participant. So the rationale behind setting the price at $3,000 is really a sort of purist market view that $3,000 is around the level of alternate market options. So if this is a regular occurrence, then people would invest in demand response and new generation and so on. That's the market in theory. The reality of the situation March 26 was there was never any shortage of supply. Genesis themselves had at least 250 megawatts all day that was spinning and available for generation. It was just priced at $20,000. So I think had this situation occurred and Genesis were using the last megawatt at $20,000, I think that would be a much more acceptable outcome. But the reality is there was no supply-demand imbalance. They just had the market cornered and had the ability and exercised that to increase prices. So the issue still remains that prices can be high. They can be several $1,000s. The authority has been careful to outline that in different circumstances they might have come to a different conclusion, and that the market shouldn't rely on $3,000 being an implicit or explicit cap and so on. But the reality is there is a new benchmark there now, and I think you'll find, and indeed the weekend after March the 26th, there was a similar set of circumstances. The rest of the market was more prepared for it, so that the same prices didn't occur. But if you look at the offer curves, not only did Genesis offer it at somewhere around $20,000, Contact decided to join in as well. So we're seeing the precedent that has been set by these events.
What about Genesis's defence in terms of it has come out and said denied that there was any manipulative behaviour going on, that a high offer alone isn't evidence of that, and it says it submitted its offers the day before to the market, and that it had no control over demand being higher than forecast, and also that Contact withdrew some capacity on the day. I mean,
Sure,
what do you make of those defences?
So I think that there's a number of things in the factual matrix of what went on that day, and yes, there was a transmission outage, that's accepted. Yes, Contact also extended their outage of the Taranaki combined cycle plant. Whether that was a genuine need to extend that maintenance, or whether they saw there as an opportunity, would be speculation. So don't deny that those things happened. What we also saw was an increase in the generation from Takanu Power Station, Genesis owned power station, which either intentionally or unintentionally had the impact of making that transmission constraint worse, so opened up the need for Huntly generation. So Genesis' argument on that is that they were managing their own position in the lower South Island, in the lower North Island, so that is a credible response to that. But the unintended consequence of that obviously is increasing the transmission constraint and forcing generation out from the Auckland region. So I think there's a whole range of other things in the factual matrix, but I can't get past the offer curve of Genesis that for 12 years they've never had an offer that looks anything like $20,000, and on a Saturday for an 8-hour period during a transmission outage they put in a $18,000 to $20,000 offer. I can't get past that fact, and for them to put up other arguments around what was going on and participants should manage their risk and so on are all well and good, but the fact is they deliberately submitted an offer curve that was designed around the timing of that transmission outage.
So you don't buy the argument that everyone else should have simply hedged their risk, and why do you think Genesis put prices up so high?
So I think there's a number of things in that. I agree with Genesis' argument that participants need to take responsibility for their own risk management decision, and don't dispute that at all. But in that, there's a certain risk that you need to hedge yourself against. So market price volatility driven by supply and demand conditions are one thing. Trying to hedge yourself against a participant's market behaviour when a large proportion of that risk comes from that same counterparty is a different kettle of fish altogether. And I think that's a reality of the New Zealand market, that from time to time pretty well any one of the major generators will have transient market power, and the lack of the authority dealing with the behavioural issue means that any one of these generators from time to time can now exercise that market power within maybe some defined limits now, but it will increase volatility and it will increase wholesale prices. Ultimately, end users will pay for that.
How does this wholesale market actually work? I mean, are we effectively talking about a futures market? Who runs it?
So there's an underlying spot market, which is the physical market, which is essentially, in a way, is 250 markets. The market is cleared at every single node on the national transmission network. Generators offer their capacity at their connection points, and retailers and end users bid to buy that capacity at their points of connection. So that's the spot market, or the half-hourly market, formerly known as the NZEM. That's now run by the stock exchange NZX, run what was previously EMCO, the electricity market company. They run the clearing settlements, and Transpower obviously does the real-time dispatch across the physical network. So that's the underlying market. There are secondary markets. Generators have bilateral hedge arrangements amongst themselves and with wholesale counterparties, and there's also a secondary, which is now a secondary market, which is now futures, run by the Australian Stock Exchange.
And do you think there's anything to prevent the events of March the 26th from happening again? I mean, people have probably taken on board the lessons from it, I imagine. I
think the unfortunate reality is the generators have taken quite a different lesson, that the behaviour hasn't been ruled as unacceptable, and that there's opportunities to do similar things in similar circumstances, and that's our main concern. That it's really that it comes back to a market purist view versus what does the real market look like? A small market with a small number of players with known opportunities for transient market power to exist, and really no rules around what should happen in those circumstances.
And I mean, we're talking about the wholesale market here, but for the sort of retail customer, the granny sitting in her flat in the middle of winter trying to keep warm, what does it mean for that sort of person, all of this activity?
So there's an immediate sort of direct issue that as wholesale prices get more volatile, there's more risk, and that increases, the cost to energy retailers. That's the first and most direct impact. But I think the second impact, which is potentially equally important but over a longer time frame, is that independent retailers like ourselves, and there's another, 2 or 3 other smaller players out there trying to carve a niche in this market, will actually be scared away. The risks are so unmanageable, and the only way to manage them is to hedge with the party that's controlling that risk, and it's just an untenable situation.
So what do you think needs to be done? I mean, are you advocating for some reforms of the market?
I think it needs to be clear, either through direct rules or through precedent setting around situations like this, that this sort of behaviour is not tolerable, that the authority recognises that the market in practice is different from the market in reality in certain circumstances, and attempts to restrain market behaviour to replicate what a more competitive situation might look like if that exists. So, these are transient things. It's not about regulating the market every half hour of every day. It's saying that when these circumstances exist, that a certain behaviour is expected. I think that's the first point. I think the second point. Well, there's a couple of other points. The second point I'd make is that the authority put a lot of weight on some deficiencies in market information, saying that they may not have come to the same decision had the market schedule that's done the day before had shown those prices, that the market could have then been forewarned of and acted on that. I would argue that one day is not enough. As a retailer, it's not realistic for us to have to see $20,000 prices on a Friday for Saturday and actually be able to do anything about it. Demand response in the non-half-hourly market doesn't actually reduce our risk because of the way the settlement works, so there's actually very limited options we've got to change our exposure to those events. So I think while I don't dispute the theory that if you get enough warning, the higher prices are acceptable because you've got more time to do things about it, I think one day is too short. So I think need to think about what an appropriate time frame is around managing that sort of behaviour. And the other point I'd sort of make, where there may be a need for reform, probably what motivated Genesis to get into the situation was there's been a long-running dispute, I guess, with the industry around the funding of their Huntly power station. So they spend a lot of money to have that plant, and a lot of the time that plant sits idle. And I think there's a certain amount of sympathy with that argument. So there may be a need. The other feature of the New Zealand market's energy only, so participants don't get paid for having capacity sitting idle. It may be time now to review that structure, and it could be time to introduce a capacity component to the market. If you go pre-market days, what's happening to Huntly has happened to power stations before. It happened to Whirinaki, it happened to Miri. It's the life cycle of those thermal plants. They get built, they run base load, they go into a hydro-firming role, and then they get used less and less, and ultimately they get decommissioned. There's nothing new about that in Huntly. What we've got now, though, is a different market structure in which that's happening, and it may be appropriate, given that, to review the remuneration for that sort of capacity.
Any ideas on how that could happen?
I mean, I think capacity market is an option, so rewarding generators for having capacity available, not just for producing energy, is one option, and that's certainly common in other markets where they have a greater reliance on thermal capacity. They have been explored in the New Zealand market and dismissed for a variety of reasons, but given the commercial reality faced by Genesis and the sorts of alternatives, it's probably time to review those.
Now look, I think Contact and Vector in their submissions on the events of March 26th have said that setting retrospective prices could be a disincentive for investors to invest their money in these companies and in their power plants. What do you make of that sort of view?
I can understand where they're coming from. I think the first point I make, though, is that The prices weren't published retrospectively. There was no prices published for that day, and the publication of those prices was intentionally deferred for that very reason. So I agree that retrospective action is always has issues associated with it. So I can understand their viewpoint. But the other point I'd make is that having unrestrained market power with a regulatory authority who doesn't seem to want to deal with that will also create investment uncertainty. So I think you've got to get the balance right.
And look, do you think that there should be a price ceiling and maybe a price floor as well set? And are there any other reforms you'd like to see to the market that we haven't touched on?
Personally, I don't like the idea of a price ceiling or a price floor. Ceilings in particular, like I've said in the Australian market, they tend to justify generators offering at that level. So if you were to, for example, set a cap at 3,000 or 20,000 or whatever it is, I'm convinced that you would see a number of generation offers sitting around that level. So rather than restraining market power in certain circumstances, you actually create opportunities all of the time. So personally, I don't favour having a formal ceiling, and I think that has probably served the New Zealand market well, that the uncertainty around how high a generator can go and get away with it is moderating their behaviour more than a formalised cap.
Well, thanks for that, Ari. That's Ari Sargent, the CEO of Powershop, and I'm Gareth Vaughan from interest.co.nz.